In 20 years, humans could set foot on Mars, but how? What if I told you the journey isn't just about rockets and spacesuits? It's a series of mind-bending challenges, some of which could make or break humanity's dream of conquering the red planet. From secretive tech developments to life or death decisions, the real plan for Mars exploration will shock you. Let's break down the stages of this mission and why the first one could be the hardest of all. Mars. For decades, it's been the holy grail of space exploration, but the idea of sending humans to Mars isn't a new one. It's been talked about for years. The real question is, how do we actually do it? The vision is clear: set up a sustainable human presence on the red planet. But before we can start living there, we need to figure out how to get there safely. That's where the stages of the Mars mission come into play. But here's the truth: this mission isn't just about landing a spaceship on Mars and calling it a day. This is a multi-stage journey that will redefine what's possible in space exploration. Imagine living in a dome on another planet, surviving with limited resources, and making history by becoming the first humans to colonize another world. But before that dream becomes a reality, there are mountains to climb, and the first stage might be the biggest one. Before we even think about Mars, we need a base. But not on Mars, on the Moon. NASA's Artemis program is the first major step toward interplanetary travel. It's a bold plan to establish a sustainable human presence on the Moon, and it's more than just a pit stop. Think of it as the testing ground for everything we need to get to Mars. Building bases, creating life support systems, and testing resource extraction, all of this will happen on the Moon before a single astronaut sets foot on Mars. Artemis will also test out the technologies that will be used on Mars, like 3D printing, extracting water from lunar ice, and even building habitats that could withstand the harsh conditions of space. But there's a bigger reason Artemis is so critical to the Mars mission. It's the testing ground for deep space technologies. The Moon's proximity to Earth means we can fix mistakes more easily. By the time we reach Mars, there will be fewer unknowns. And without Artemis, Mars may forever remain out of reach. But here's the thing: you can't just throw astronauts in a spaceship and send them to Mars without a plan. That's why the first stage of the mission involves sending critical equipment ahead of time. Fuel, power systems, habitats, and supplies will all be sent to Mars years before the astronauts arrive. Imagine this: the crew is en route, but the survival gear is already waiting on the Martian surface. Pre-positioning supplies will ensure that when astronauts land, they don't have to wait months for backup. This first step isn't just important, it's life-saving. And the more we send ahead, the fewer risks there are. This includes fuel for the return trip and shelter. The last thing we want is to leave astronauts stranded on Mars without the means to get back home. So, the astronauts land on Mars. But how do they get back? This is where the Mars Ascent Vehicle, or MAV, comes into play. Without it, the crew wouldn't be able to make it off the planet and back to Earth. The MAV is a crucial piece of the puzzle. It's the vehicle that will launch astronauts off the Martian surface and bring them back to the spacecraft in orbit. Without it, the mission would be doomed from the start. But building this vehicle isn't as easy as it sounds. Mars' gravity is weaker than Earth's, but it's still strong enough to make lifting off a challenge. The MAV has to be engineered with precision, and its fuel and propulsion systems must be able to withstand the harsh conditions of the Martian environment. Developing the MAV also means working out the details of how the crew will interact with the spacecraft in orbit. Will they need to rendezvous with a space station? How long will the MAV take to launch? And most importantly, what happens if it fails? Now, we get to the real kicker, the human element. Mars is far, and I mean really far. A journey to Mars can take anywhere from 6 to 9 months, and during that time, astronauts will face some of the harshest conditions known to humankind. It's not just the physical challenges, though. Imagine being locked in a spaceship with a small crew for nearly a year, limited space, no contact with Earth, and constant pressure to keep the mission moving forward. The mental toll is just as severe. The isolation and claustrophobia are real concerns, but there's something more pressing: the risk of psychological breakdown. Astronauts will have to be trained not just to handle spacesuits, but also to manage their mental and emotional health. A single breakdown could jeopardize the entire mission. But that's not the only obstacle on this long journey. Exposure to deep space radiation is another danger that must be mitigated. Without proper shielding, astronauts could be exposed to harmful cosmic rays and solar radiation. The potential damage to their health could shorten their lives significantly, or even result in long-term illness. Developing effective radiation protection is crucial, otherwise, the risks of the mission outweigh the reward. Landing on Mars might sound straightforward, but it's one of the most dangerous parts of the entire mission. The Martian atmosphere is so thin that parachutes don't work well, and the surface is rough and unpredictable. One wrong move could mean disaster. Imagine what it would be like for the crew to finally touch down after months in space. They are tired, stressed, and likely disoriented after the long journey, but their work begins immediately. First, they need to ensure that their landing site is stable. Mars' gravity may be weaker than Earth's, but the planet is still riddled with craters and uneven terrain that could cause problems. They'll need to set up a temporary base to survive while they figure out how to mine resources, grow food, and establish a permanent presence. The first few days could be the most critical and the most dangerous of the entire mission. During this time, the crew must assess their supplies, establish communication with Earth, and prepare to survive the Martian winter. This is where the failure of the mission becomes most likely. One misstep and everything could go wrong. But this mission isn't just about landing. NASA's vision for Mars is about creating a sustainable colony. Imagine a self-sufficient Martian base where astronauts can grow food, mine resources, and even generate power from the Martian environment. The long-term goal is nothing short of revolutionary, terraforming the planet, turning it into something Earth-like, and establishing a permanent human presence. We are talking about creating the first off-Earth colony, an entirely new chapter in human history. But how do we get there? How do we build a thriving colony from scratch on a planet that has never hosted life? These are the questions that will shape our future. Over the next few decades, the focus will shift from simply surviving on Mars to thriving. We'll begin building larger habitats, tapping into Mars' natural resources, and perhaps even transforming the planet's atmosphere to make it more Earth-like. It sounds like science fiction, but it's the next frontier. The key to it all, innovation, and the first colonists will be the ultimate test subjects. They'll lay the foundation for the generations that will follow. As exciting as the idea of humans on Mars is, the reality of the mission is anything but easy. The technology, the risk, and the unknowns make it one of the boldest plans ever conceived. The stages of Mars exploration are already in motion, but the biggest challenges are still ahead. So, the real question is, will we make it, or will Mars prove to be humanity's greatest failure? Only time will tell, but here's something that might surprise you. Some experts believe that Mars may not be as hospitable as we think. Despite all the advancements, there's still the possibility that the planet's harsh conditions will make long-term survival impossible. Could the dream of colonizing Mars be a fool's errand? What if we find out too late that we've bitten off more than we can chew? And then there's the question of humanity's readiness. Are we truly prepared for what life on Mars would entail? Beyond the technological hurdles, how do we ensure that the people who live there don't become alienated, physically and mentally, from Earth? The idea of a Mars colony sounds like science fiction, but there are real-world consequences to sending humans so far from home. Could the mission's very success lead to unforeseen social and psychological dilemmas? Then, of course, there's the long-term goal, terraforming Mars. Transforming an entire planet into something that can sustain life is no small feat. Imagine the consequences of attempting something so monumental. Will we end up creating a new world, or will our attempt backfire in ways we can't yet foresee? Could we even be playing with fire, altering a planet's ecosystem in ways we don't fully understand? But what if I told you the first phase of the mission was just the beginning? There's a bigger question looming. Could Mars be the first stepping stone in humanity's journey to conquer the stars? What if Mars is just one piece of a much larger puzzle? After all, we've only scratched the surface of space exploration. The real shocker may be that Mars is just the beginning of an entirely new chapter of human history. So, the big question remains, will humanity be able to overcome all the obstacles ahead and become an interplanetary species? Or will Mars remain forever out of reach, an untapped frontier that tantalizes but never quite delivers? The future of Mars exploration is unfolding right before our eyes, and the stakes couldn't be higher. What do you think? Will we conquer Mars, or are we getting ahead of ourselves? Will our technological advancements be enough to overcome the unimaginable challenges that await us? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe humanity is ready for the journey to Mars, or is this just another chapter in an ongoing saga of ambitious dreams and bitter realities? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more updates on this groundbreaking mission. Because whether or not we make it to Mars, one thing is certain, the story is far from over.